Another way in which the industry exerts pressure on doctors is by offering us a variety of professional services. In one of these services, widely advertised to GPs, a company representative shows the practice manager how to use a company disk to trawl through the practice database identifying patients with problems which might be treatable with the company's products. When that has been done, a company-sponsored nurse interviews the selected patients and draws up a management plan for the GP which, if approved by the doctor, attracts a Medicare item number. One of these companies proudly announces that over 65,000 patients were assessed in this way in 2005. What, one may ask, is a pharmaceutical company doing assessing patients? It is surprising that no government or professional body has stepped in to prevent this commercially sponsored program. Well, I'm absolutely delighted first of all to have been appointed to this professorship. The role is going to be about public engagement in science. It is about marketing science accessible to as wide an audience as possible. It's about making it easier for our academics here at the University of Birmingham to talk about their research to the general public, and it's not just about a one-way flow of information, it very much is about dialogue.
The first section of the book covers new modes of assessment. In Chapter 1, Kimball, Goldsmith College, London, responds to criticisms of design programs as formalistic and conventional, stating that a focus on risk-taking rather than hard work in design innovation is equally problematic. His research contains 3 parts that include preliminary exploration of design innovation qualities, investigation of resulting classroom practices, and development of evidence-based assessment. The assessment he describes is presented in the form of a structured worksheet, which includes a collaborative element and digital photographs, in story format. Such a device encourages stimulating ideas, but does not recognize students as design innovators. The assessment sheet includes holistic impressions as well as details about having, growing, and proving ideas. Colloquial judgments are evident in terms such as wow and yawn and reward the quality and quantity of ideas with the term, sparkiness, which fittingly is a pun as the model project was to design light bulb packaging. Perhaps you've seen pictures of the large array of, those radio telescopes in New Mexico, scanning the skies for intelligent life in the movie Contact. Well, radiant astronomers have cause to celebrate the first phase of a giant new radio telescope array went operational in Northern California. It's going to help astronomers study things like black holes and dark galaxies. All the while scanning the stars for, who knows, radio signals coming from somewhere else in the universe. Maybe ET is phoning home. Rebuilding carbon-rich agriculture soils is the only real productive, permanent solution to taking excess carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. She's frustrated that scientists and politicians don't see the same opportunities she sees. This year Australia will emit just over 600 million tons of carbon. We can sequester 685 million tons of carbon by increasing soil carbon by 0.5% on only 2% of the farms. If we increased it on all of the farms, we could sequester the whole world's emissions of carbon. Financial markets swung wildly yesterday in a frenzied trading market by further selling of equities and fears about an unraveling of the global carry trade. At the same time, trading in the European credit markets in London was exceptionally heavy as traders frantically reassessed their appetite for risk, prompting wild swings in the prices of the key derivatives. It was the third day of frenetic activity in the European credit markets, suggesting that equity market swings were prompting a wider repositioning of investors in a host of asset classes. Lawrence Stephen Lowry RBSRA was an English artist. Many of his drawings and paintings depict Penlebury, Lancashire, where he lived and worked for more than 40 years, and also Salford and its surrounding areas. Lowry is famous for painting scenes of life in the industrial districts of northwest England in the mid-20th century. He developed a distinctive style of painting, and is best known for his city landscapes peopled with human figures often referred to as Matchstick Man. He painted mysterious unpopulated landscapes, brooding portraits, and the unpublished Marionette works, which were only found after his death. No, in fact, Neo-Latin is more or less the same as the Latin that was written in the ancient world, Classical Latin. So, what's so new about it? The effect of the first difference is, on the one hand, to refine and enlarge the public views, by passing them through the medium of a chosen body of citizens, whose wisdom may best discern the true interests of their country, and whose patriotism and love of justice will be least likely to sacrifice it to temporary or partial considerations. Under such a regulation, it may well happen that the public voice pronounced by the representatives of the people will be more consonant to the public good than if pronounced by the people themselves, convened for the purpose. For the first time, Japanese researchers have conducted a real-life experiment that shows how some traffic jams appear for no apparent reason. They placed the 22 vehicles on a single track and asked the drivers to cruise around at a constant speed of 30 kilometers an hour. At first, traffic moved smoothly, but soon, the distance between cars started to vary and vehicles clumped together at one point on the track, but the jam spread backward around the track, like a shockwave at a rate of about 20 kilometers an hour. Real-life jams move backward at about the same speed.
Hi, everybody. This weekend, we'll dedicate the newest American icon on our National Mall, the National Museum of African American History and Culture. It's a beautiful building, 5 stories high and some 70 feet below the ground, situated just across the street from the Washington Monument. And this museum tells a story of America that hasn't always taken a front seat in our national narrative. As a people, we've rightfully passed on the tales of the giants who built this country, but too often, willful or not, we've chosen to gloss over or ignore entirely the experience of millions upon millions of others. But this museum chooses to tell a fuller story. It doesn't gauze up some bygone era or avoid uncomfortable truths. Rather, it embraces the patriotic recognition that America is a constant work in progress, that each successive generation can look upon our imperfections and decide that it is within our collective power to align this nation with the high ideals of our founders.
Last year, astronomers observed 2 neutron stars collide, a crash transmitted in gravitational waves to detectors here on Earth. Represented in sound, you can hear a small upward sweep in frequency in the data, if you listen closely. Several seconds later, the first waves of electromagnetic radiation arrived here on Earth, the first time a collision has been detected by both light and gravitational waves. And it's in studying the electromagnetic echoes of the collision that astrophysicists have gotten a far better glimpse of what really happened after those binary neutron stars merged 130 million light years away.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So it gives us an understanding of basically all the nitty-gritties of what is going on after the merger takes place.
Kunal Muley, an astrophysicist at Caltech. First, he says, the stars collided, creating a massive black hole-like object, which started sucking up the cloud of neutron-rich cosmic debris left over from the crash. But its appetite was limited.
It cannot eat all of it, so some bit of it basically escapes.
Those escaping leftovers spewed outward into space as a powerful jet. But along the way, Muley says, the jet appears to have interacted with that cloud of neutron-rich material, blowing up a sort of cocoon within the debris floating around the collision, until finally the jet burst out and slammed into interstellar space, releasing yet more radiation we could detect here on Earth.
As a consumer, you're probably consuming imports. If we have a trade war and we start slapping tariffs on all of those imports, the bill is going to be higher. If the world relies so much on trade, what is a trade war and why do countries get caught up in them in the first place? Interesting sound. I would have guessed a Wild West performer was practicing with a bullwhip while also vacuuming. But no. That sound is apparently produced by the aurora borealis, the northern lights. Since 2000, researchers at Finland's Aalto University have been collecting audio as part of what's called the Auroral Acoustics Project. Folk tales have long held that the lights also produce odd sounds, but the claims were hard to prove. And some researchers thought that any noises produced by the energetic particles that cause the light show would be far too high in the sky to be heard on the ground. But the latest results indicate that at least some sounds are produced very close to the ground. A setup of 3 ground-based microphones allowed researchers to estimate that the sounds occur perhaps just 70 meters up. The results were just presented at the International Congress on Sound and Vibration in Vilnius, Lithuania. More information about the sounds of the northern lights could lead to a more complete understanding of the phenomenon. So if you see an aurora, keep your ears open.
Sweet potatoes contain fiber, vitamin A and calcium. But the way that scientists think they can make them even more healthful is literally shocking. Researchers found that giving a jolt of electricity to sweet potatoes increased the level of antioxidants known as polyphenols by 60%. The investigators placed sweet potatoes in a solution of sodium chloride. They found that 0.2 amps of direct current gave the potatoes nearly 1.5 times more antioxidants than potatoes that weren't shocked. The research was presented at the national meeting of the American Chemical Society. It seems that the electric zap stressed the potatoes into producing more polyphenols as a protective mechanism. And the treatment did not sacrifice flavor. Previous research has shown that electrically supercharging white potatoes increases antioxidant levels. So perhaps it's only a matter of time before other fruits and vegetables get shock-counted therapy to restart. I'd recommend that you all try to get hold of English in the Southern Hemisphere by Nayland and Watts, as this provides an excellent overview of the topics that we're going to be covering in this module. It's really our primary text. It has particularly strong sections on the history of English in Australia and New Zealand, examining in some depth how the language has developed in these countries. The sections on phonology and on vocabulary will be invaluable when you're doing the written assignment, which I'm going to be telling you about in a moment once I've given you the details of a couple of other essential references.
It isn't necessary to have a specialized knowledge of, say, the intricacies of counterpoint, or even to be able to read music to understand it. Usually, getting the point of a piece of music, its emotional and dramatic impact, is immediate or simply requires you to become more familiar with it. Of course, prolonged study of music and its composition, as in any other field, will increase your understanding, but not necessarily your enjoyment. Now, I realize that it can require a good deal of willingness on our part to risk new sensations, and there is a lot of music that will seem unfamiliar and alien to you on a first hearing. The spinal cord, the link between the brain and the body, is a band of nervous tissue about the thickness of your little finger that runs through the backbone. Nerve cells called motor neurons convey electrical impulses that travel from the brain to the spinal cord, branching off at the appropriate point and passing to the various parts of the body. Similarly, sensory neurons transmit messages from organs and tissues via the spinal cord to the brain. But the spinal cord also functions without the brain having to intervene. It alone controls those actions called spinal reflexes that need to be carried out very fast in response to danger.
Well, Alex, the National Association of Realtors is at least putting the champagne on ice. The industry group says the slight rise in sales for previously owned homes shows the housing market is finally stabilizing, which is the first sign of a recovery. Now, that of course is an interpretation of the numbers, Alex, and one that's coming from an organization known for being somewhat of a cheerleader for the housing market, since its members are made up of realtors who've been losing a lot of money in the slump. Now, for a more sober view, I talked to Wellesley housing economist Carl Case, and he says the slight uptick in sales hardly offsets the fact that numbers are down 20% from the year before.
A really good illustrative example of the point I want to make is the book Journey Cake, Ho! By Ruth Sawyer, based on a traditional folk tale. Teachers often read this aloud to their classes, showing the pictures to the children as they do so. They are, of course, using the words of Ruth Sawyer and presenting the story just as the artist has visualized it. But other teachers do it differently. Instead of reading, they tell the story from memory. This gives the children a much richer experience. They can freely use their own imaginations, visualizing the story, the characters, and the scenes in their mind's eye in any way they like. And this is much closer to the way in which folk tales were passed from generation to generation orally, without any words or pictures to restrict the imagination.
The free phone is the Samsung U740 handheld mobile device, which has MP3, video, text message, and instant message functions. Students will earn text messages, talk time, and other rewards, such as free ringtones, music downloads, or even tickets, through their performance in school, the Education Department said in a news release. Students will be evaluated on the basis of attendance and behavior, along with 3 other indicators, such as homework completion, class participation, or course grades, chosen by educators and customized to address academic priorities in their specific schools. Administrators will have access to significant new data on student performance, allowing them to track the short-term indicators that contribute to larger goals of boosting student achievement and graduation rates.